Evil always carries the seed of its own undoing. It creates unease. But stupidity feels self-satisfied, immune, and convinced of its own rightness. And that's what makes it far more dangerous. What if I told you that stupidity isn't just the absence of intelligence, but something far more insidious? A force that can transform brilliant minds into instruments of destruction. What if the greatest threat to civilization isn't evil people doing evil things, but ordinary people who simply stop thinking for themselves? Imagine a well-respected scientist, highly educated, suddenly embracing misinformation. A teacher begins to support harmful beliefs. A devoted parent starts making choices that put their own children at risk. These individuals are not malicious. They're intelligent, well-intentioned people who have succumbed to what Dietrich Bonhoeffer referred to as the power of stupidity. This isn't a phenomenon affecting others. It's happening to people just like you and me. This goes far beyond mere philosophical speculation. Dietrich Bonhoeffer wasn't your typical philosopher. He was a German Lutheran pastor who watched his entire society transform firsthand. Born in 1906 into an intellectual family, his father was a prominent psychiatrist and neurologist. Bonhoeffer had every reason to believe in the power of education and rational discourse. From his prison cell in 1943, waiting to be executed for his role in a plot to assassinate Hitler, Bonhoeffer wrote this observation: "Against stupidity we are defenseless. Neither protest nor the use of force accomplish anything here. Reasons fall on deaf ears. Evil always carries within itself the germ of its own subversion. It creates unease. But stupidity, well, it believes it's doing good, making it absolutely immune to correction. Stupidity serves existing power structures, and that's not accidental. Those in power don't need to actively suppress information. They just need to create conditions where processing information honestly becomes difficult." When Bonhoeffer used the word stupidity, he wasn't talking about low IQ or a lack of education. He was describing something far more complex than willful ignorance. In his letters from prison, he explained the fact that a stupid person is often stubborn must not blind us to the fact that he's not independent. In conversation with him, one virtually feels one is dealing not at all with him as a person, but with slogans and catchphrases and the like that have taken possession of him.
And we will make America great again.
He argued that stupidity often emerges not from individual failings, but from systematic pressures that make thinking independently both difficult and costly. The truth is, our economic systems actively incentivize intellectual shortcuts. Social media platforms make billions when users react emotionally rather than think critically. News outlets get more clicks with outrage than nuance. Politicians win elections with simple slogans rather than complex policy proposals.
Yes, we can.
When people are working multiple jobs, drowning in debt, and constantly bombarded with information, intellectual surrender becomes a survival strategy. Economists call this rational ignorance. It becomes more efficient for individuals to remain uninformed about complex issues than to invest time and energy required for genuine understanding. But this creates collective irrationality. The result isn't just individual choice, it's structural pressure. While economic systems push us towards intellectual shortcuts, our brains are actually wired to comply. Leon Festinger's research on cognitive dissonance in the 1950s showed exactly how this works psychologically. When people encounter information that contradicts their beliefs, their brains fight to reject it. This process is amplified when people are stressed and overwhelmed. Bonhoeffer observed that stupidity often emerges in group settings, writing, "It simply becomes clear that stupidity is not a psychological problem, but a sociological one." He noticed that perfectly rational people would abandon their critical thinking abilities when they became part of a larger group or movement. Solomon Asch's conformity experiments in the 1950s demonstrated exactly what Bonhoeffer had witnessed. When surrounded by a group giving obviously wrong answers, 75% of people will go along with the crowd at least once, even when they know the group is wrong. Now imagine how this plays out in our digital age. Social media algorithms create echo chambers that make this transformation easy. A 2018 study by MIT researchers found that false information spreads 6 times faster than true information on social platforms. It's because false information often feels more emotionally satisfying than complex truths. When someone shares misinformation that confirms their worldview, they're participating in a system that rewards intellectual shortcuts over careful analysis. The algorithm feeds them more of the same, creating sort of an intellectual quicksand, if you will. Have you ever noticed how your social media feed seems to show you exactly what you want to see? That's not an accident. It's the architecture of chosen ignorance in action. We see this pattern play out repeatedly throughout history. The Salem witch trials weren't conducted by evil people, but by God-fearing community members who genuinely believed they were protecting their neighbors. The Red Scare of the 1950s wasn't driven by malicious actors, but by patriotic Americans who sincerely thought they were defending democracy. In each case, intelligent, educated people abandoned critical thinking in favor of group consensus and emotional certainty. If our brains and systems are rigged against us, how do we fight back? I believe that breaking free from stupidity requires the willingness to think independently even when it's painful, unpopular, or dangerous. But I understand we're not just fighting social pressure, we're fighting computer-driven algorithms designed to exploit our mental shortcuts. On an individual level, we can cultivate what psychologists call intellectual humility, the recognition that our knowledge is always incomplete and potentially wrong. This means actively seeking out information that contradicts our beliefs, not to torture ourselves, but to test whether our beliefs are worth holding. Okay, so try a few of these things out and let me know what you think. Try to practice intellectual friction. Read thoughtful arguments from people who disagree with you, not to change your mind, but to test whether your convictions can withstand scrutiny. Try to embrace productive ignorance when you find yourself absolutely certain about something. Ask what evidence would change your mind. If you can't think of any, perhaps that's a red flag. Oh, and slow roll your share button. Before posting anything online, take 60 seconds to verify it from an independent source. That brief pause can break the algorithm that feeds on emotional reactions. Practice saying, "I don't know." In a world that rewards confident ignorance over humble uncertainty, admitting gaps in your knowledge becomes a radical act. If you simply don't know something, literally say, "I don't know." A few weeks ago, I made a video where I said, "Communication is so incredibly vital. Now, I'm just a dummy American living abroad. I don't have a horse in this race. But if you do, I suggest having genuine conversations with people who have different views as yourself. Go into those conversations with the intent of listening, not just speaking your mind. If you truly have a dog in this fight, stop gathering in like-minded groups and bitching about everything you see on the news like a bunch of old folks playing gin rummy." Bonhoeffer's theory was brilliant for its time, but it's extremely relevant in our current situation. Now, we have social media algorithms that know exactly what psychological buttons to push, and now we're entering the age of AI deepfakes that can fabricate reality itself. It's targeting the very architecture of human cognition. Our minds evolved to prioritize speed over accuracy, to seek information that confirms what we already believe. We are all vulnerable no matter how smart we think we are. When people feel threatened and uncertain, they become more susceptible to authoritative-sounding explanations that reduce complexity to simple narratives. We're not just dealing with human manipulation anymore. We're facing systems designed to exploit our cognitive vulnerabilities with surgical precision. Every click, every pause, every emotional reaction is being analyzed and weaponized against our capacity for independent thought. Who stands fast when the pressure to conform is overwhelming, when thinking independently requires courage, when the cost of truth is higher than the price of comfortable lies? Who? The answer isn't found in superior intelligence or education. It's found in the daily choice to remain curious rather than certain, to seek truth rather than comfort, to think carefully rather than react quickly. These are ordinary practices that become extraordinary when everybody around you stops doing them. The tragedy in my mind is that intellectual surrender often feels like liberation. Thinking is hard work. It's uncomfortable to hold complex, contradictory ideas in your mind simultaneously. It's painful to admit you might be wrong about something important. But this discomfort is the price of remaining human. In a world that profits from our intellectual surrender, we're all susceptible to functional stupidity. The moment we think we're immune, we've already begun to succumb. The price of intellectual freedom is eternal vigilance, not against external enemies, but against our own tendency to stop thinking when thinking becomes difficult. Al contrario.
John គឺអស្ចារ្យណាស់គាត់កំពុងបង្ហាញពីការយល់ឃើញរបស់គាត់ចំពោះអាមេរិកនៅពេលគាត់រស់នៅប្រទេសកម្ពុជា John បុរសដែលតស៊ូដើម្បីប្រទេសរបស់គាត់ដែលមិនចង់រស់នៅអាមេរិក John អាចមើលឃើញថាអាមេរិកកំពុងតែឆ្កួតពេក